Linda, you're in favour of an Indigenous voice in Parliament. Don't Indigenous Australians already have representations in Australian Parliament? I had hoped to have a lengthier interaction with Linda Burney this morning. It may be that after the show, when she's departing, there might be an opportunity. It happened that I was invited to attend a Q&A episode in this very studio at Southbank some time ago, and Linda Burney was one of the panelists, and the ABC kindly selected me to be one of the people to ask a question. And I don't have the text of the question in front of me, but it was along the line, my comment was along the lines of, I've been an Australian taxpayer for over 50 years, and part of my taxes have gone to support needy Indigenous people across Australia, and I'm perfectly happy with that. But I had reached the stage where I felt that no government recognition or supply of benefits should be made other than, as far as recognition is concerned, actual achievement or government benefits should be provided only in respect of actual need, rather than the race of the affected individuals. And I asked for comment from the panellists. As it happened, only two of the panellists I think Jim Mullen was on the panel that night, but they didn't ask Jim to respond. They asked two people on the panel to respond. I think one of them was Sammy Shah, and I stand to be corrected on that. And the other was Linda Burney. And she expressed the view that she found my comments, she was sorry that I had made such a comment, and inferred or made comment to the effect that did I think that bigotry and racism hadn't been a facet of Australia's history. Now, nowhere in my comments at the commencement of on the episode did I make any comment about bigotry or denying that there has been bigotry and racism in Australia. I merely asked the question and expressed my opinion that recognition of individuals and payment of benefits to individuals should be on the basis of, as far as recognition, actual achievements, as far as benefits, actual need, rather than on the basis of someone's race. I stand by my comments. I have never discriminated against anyone in my life on the basis of their race. I'm 73 years old. I actually grew up in America in the 1950s when segregation was the norm. I went to what was effectively an all-white school, elementary school, and black children went to their own school across town. I came to Australia in 1963, where there was no government segregation, and I recall that in 1968 there was a referendum about including Indigenous people in the census, for goodness sake. And I don't think I was old enough to vote in that referendum, but I totally supported the idea that Indigenous Australians should be included in the census. And I spent years in Australia where there may well have been bigotry and racism, but it was not enshrined in the legislation of Australia. And as far as I was aware, there was no legal discrimination against Indigenous people and have them treated differently than other Australians, with the proviso that in the last 20 years there's been things called Koori courts in Melbourne. I've been in Melbourne for 13 or 14 years now, and I'm aware that there's something called a Koori court, where it appears that alleged Indigenous offenders have a separate legal system just for them. In all honesty, I'm opposed to the idea of separate legal processes for people based on their race. But anyway, I'll be intrigued to hear what Linda has to say on Insiders this morning, and if there's any chance to chat with her on the way out, I will do so. I do note that it appears that Linda came out of a nearby hotel building around the corner from their ABC studios in South Bank. So my assumption is, and I could be incorrect, my assumption is that Linda may have flown down, let's say, from Canberra or some other part of Australia to appear on the program today. So I wonder whether Linda's daily CO2 emissions are in excess of mine, given that I walked around from my nearby home in South Bank to come to the ABC studios this morning. Bill Thompson for Outside Insiders. Good morning, Bill Thompson for Outside Insiders, Linda.
Yeah, that'd be good actually.
Sorry, Bill, I haven't got time.
That's all right. Cassius Turvey was murdered in West Australia, and the murder has received blanket media coverage. 2 years ago, Britney Watson was murdered in outback Western Australia, and her murder never received any coverage at all. Are you familiar with the name Britney Watson? She's an Indigenous woman who was an 18-year-old mother. Surely you're aware of Britney Watson. The murder of an 18-year-old Indigenous mother means nothing to you. Is that correct, Linda? Britney Watson's murder means nothing to you. Is that correct, Linda? Britney Watson's murder means nothing to you, Linda. Is that correct? Indigenous minister? I wonder what high-level brand Linda Burney was wearing this morning. I think it's an absolute disgrace that a woman who purports to be the Minister for Indigenous Affairs in Australia was not prepared to engage in the lack of publicity by the Australian media on the outrageous violent murder of Britney Watson in an outback West Australian community. But they're all over the story of Cassius Turvey. One possible explanation is that the murder of Cassius can be portrayed as an episode of racist behaviour, while the murder of Britney Watson apparently was just one of the things that happen in remote Indigenous communities, and the women can go unreported to the Australian public at large, because media, including their ABC TV News, apparently is of the view that only some black lives matter.